muchas gracias por su asistencia. Les recordamos que estamos en el ciclo de conferencias. Les recordamos que estamos en el ciclo de conferencias del Centro de Estudios China-México en la Facultad de Economía de la UNAM, que estamos realizando con la doctora Yolanda Trápaga ya desde casi una década. Y aprendiendo, yo creo que cada vez uno se mete más en el tema, comprende. Entonces, muy invitados a seguir ahí algunas de las actividades que estamos realizando en el Cechimex. Tenemos un bonito semestre. Yo los invito, algunos de ustedes habrán visto el programa del ciclo de conferencias. Un nutrido intenso semestre con temas para mediar bastante diferentes vinculados a migración, a temas de ciencia y tecnología, a temas de idioma, la sociedad del chino mandarín, temas culturales, temas reflexiones, yo les diría, de recientes funcionarios de México en China, como el ex cónsul general en Shanghái, Rolando García Alonso, entre otros. Y yo creo que interesante conferencia también a mediados de mayo con el embajador de Japón en México sobre estas relaciones económicas en la cuenca del Pacífico y esta relación triangular Japón, China y México. Revisen el programa y encontrarán todas las conferencias, 2 o 3 comerciales antes de darle la palabra al ponente de hoy. Los invito mucho, el 2, 4 y 6 de marzo tendremos un grupo de conferencias por parte del doctor Dieter Enz. Tenemos ahí los trípticos, les hemos enviado la información a algunos de ustedes. Les invito mucho a participar, será en este mismo salón. Dieter Enz, yo me recuerdo, es el papá o la mamá, si ustedes quieren, de este concepto de Global Production Networks. Me parece que tan relevante, probablemente más conocido el trabajo de David Greffi, Miguel Corseña y Jennifer Berg sobre los encadenamientos mercantiles globales. Les voy a dar 3 conferencias sobre este concepto de Global Production Networks y cada loco con su tema en el caso de China, ¿no? Entonces, es un experto que viene trabajando hace 20 años, si no es que más, sobre temas de semiconductores, la industria electrónica, segmentos específicos, telecomunicaciones. En fin, me parece un tema, un aporte interesante en este diálogo que estamos buscando entre México y China. Si están interesados, ponen este tríptico y regístrense. Todos los eventos son orgullosamente gratuitos, pero requieren de registrarse, ¿no? El salón tiene un espacio definido, y entonces, en fin, ya cada vez podrán escuchar los videos o audios. Por último, o penúltimo, yo les recuerdo, conjuntamente con la UAL, la Unión de Universidades de América Latina y el Caribe y el Cechimex, hemos lanzado desde hace ya varios años este proyecto de la red de América Latina y el Caribe sobre China. Participen en este proyecto, los invito mucho a hacerse miembros de este proyecto. Creo que estamos logrando una masa crítica interesante con investigadores, funcionarios, empresarios de las Malvinas a mexicanos. Y bueno, encontrarán ahí un debate, reflexiones con colegas chinos y de otros lugares también interesantes sobre temas específicos. Y les recuerdo, el reto es incrementando el nivel de la calidad de la reflexión, ¿no? Entonces, encontrarán ahí un grupo de publicaciones sobre temas culturales, sobre temas de relaciones internacionales, también sobre temas económicos bien acá Víctor Manuel nos podrá entregar esos trípticos. Por último, los invito a participar, a los que estuvieran haciendo investigación sobre temas vinculados con China en estos cuadernos de trabajo de Cechimex. Ya llevamos alrededor de 30 documentos, hay un proceso ahí de selección. Yo les recuerdo el último número es ahí sobre uno de los padres, me parece, de los estudios latinoamericanos en China, el profesor Jingsheng, y es verdaderamente interesante e importante, yo creo que entender pues también la contraparte, ¿no? La contraparte en China, que también está aprendiendo de América Latina y México, y quiénes son estos padres y madres, yo les diría, de los estudios latinoamericanos en China, y con anécdotas y temas muy importantes, es decir, por qué, cómo se convirtieron en especialistas en China, las limitaciones, personas que han pasado y recuerdan y vivieron la revolución China en el 49, que pasaron por todas las dificultades de los 60s y 70s y que hacen una evaluación de los estudios latinoamericanos en probablemente el principal centro de investigación de América Latina y el Caribe en China, que es el Instituto de Estudios Latinoamericanos del CAS, ¿no? Entonces todo esto está disponible, lo pueden bajar, está acá por aquí. Pues muy contentos de iniciar esta primera conferencia con el doctor Dong Jingsheng, que está haciendo una breve estancia de investigación en Cechimex. Yo les recuerdo, el doctor Dong viene de hacer su licenciatura y maestría en Historia en la Universidad Normal de Shandong, tiene un doctorado también en Historia en la Universidad de Pekín, es profesor de la Universidad de Pekín desde hace más de 10 años, desde el 2002, es también el director de Estudios Latinoamericanos de la Universidad de Pekín. Y yo les recuerdo, la Universidad de Pekín es probablemente, creo, me corregirá, la principal y más importante institución académica en China, ¿no? No es un changarro cualquiera, sino que en las ciencias sociales, en las ciencias naturales, todos sabemos que hay un fuerte proceso de competencia entre las universidades chinas, pero en general es considerada la principal casa de estudios y académica en China, ¿no? Entonces estamos muy contentos de recibir al doctor Dong, que nos va a hablar sobre el proceso de modernización en China en las últimas décadas. La presentación va a ser en inglés, por razones de idioma y de lengua, y muy contento de recibir al doctor Dong. Tendremos una presentación de media hora, 45 minutos, y podremos después tener más o menos el mismo tiempo para el proceso de intercambio, ¿no? So again, thank you very much, Dr. Dong, for being here. So you will have around 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then we'll have some additional time for questions and discussion. Thank you very much for being with us. So I will leave this here.
Yes, at first I have to say that just as they said, I'm not a specialist on the nutrition.
Lo científico que está parado el micrófono.
Okay.
No está prendido.
Just as the Professor Lucet said, I'm not a specialist in Chinese culture and Chinese history. My teaching and research field is focused on America. But today, in Mexico, I don't want to talk about America because there is a very famous Chinese idiom called means it is considered foolish for a person to show off his skills of with X in front of the back. The meaning X is the technique, the instrument, the tool of the carpenter. The loop back is the master of carpenter. So it's foolish to show off his skill with X in front of loop back means to show off one's skill before expert. It's foolish to teach a fish to swim. So today I will give you a very general picture of the process of modernization in China. First question, what is the meaning of modernization? What's the meaning of modernization? Actually, as a special academic field, modernization study was started by social scientists in the United States in 1950s and 1960s. We know after the World War II, in Asia and Africa, a lot of former colonies, European colonies, gained political independence and formed the so-called the Third World. What kind of development model would these newly independent countries in Africa, in Asia, adopted? Would they follow the socialist Soviet Union or the capitalist United States? It would have great impact on the world situation, especially during the Cold War time. So in 1950s and 1960s, in the United States, political scientists, economists, sociologists, historians, all turned to their research about these newly independent countries. That was the background of the rise of modernization study. So we know from the beginning, the modernization studies were focused on the underdeveloped world, not the developed world. And in 1960s, the focus was on Latin America. In 1970s, it turned to East Asia. After 1970s and 1980s, the modernization study fell into decline in the United States, also in Europe. However, in China, modernization study began to attract more and more attention. So in our university, as well as in the Chinese Academy of Social Science, Chinese Academy of Science, there were many centers for modernization studies established since the late 1980s. I think it is because that China is now in a process of rapid modernization. Now, what is the meaning of modernization? Now, we define modernization here as a process by which societies move from rural and agrarian society based to urban industrial structure of living through application of science, technology, and rational modes of thought. That is to see in the human history, there are three kinds of productivity. The first, primitive productivity. Then the second, agricultural productivity. And the third, the industrial productivity. So the process of transition from agricultural productivity to industrial productivity, along with the political and social change, the process is called modernization. So that is to say, modernization is a process by which a society acquired modernity. So the change of society brought about by modernization. We know first began in West Europe, then spread to North America, like this, then to the rest of the world. So, if modernization is a historical process of transformation from agricultural traditional society to industrial modern society, so in order to introduce the process of modernization in China, we should know a little about the traditional Chinese society. So I think there are two characteristics of the Chinese traditional society. First, the most enduring. Historically, we know China has been a traditional agricultural society. China developed an advanced agricultural civilization. Although the Chinese were not the first to develop civilized life, but Chinese civilization with a continuous history of more than 4,000 years. It has been the world's most enduring. This was the first character, most enduring. Because we know in addition to Chinese ancient civilization in Egypt, in Mesopotamia, in India, in Greece, in Rome, as well as in Mesoamerica and Andes, in America, they are also developed advanced agricultural civilization. But these civilizations were interrupted and were not able to continue. Only Chinese civilization has been continued to now, enduring. This was the first character. The second, it also was one of the most primitive and productive. The Chinese civilization, the biases was highly efficient agricultural system, utilizing sophisticated and expensive water control and irrigation techniques. So this kind of agriculture enabled the Chinese to grow enough food to support the largest concentration of the world of people in the world. And we know ancient China also developed original writing system, one that spread to and influenced much of East Asia, and which is still used today. And the Chinese literary achievement was also significant. In fact, one half of all the world's books printed between 1750 were printed in Chinese. You know, Chinese was also adapted at combining art and function. Porcelain was the standard. You know, porcelain was the standard of the world for so long that it is simply known as China. And the Chinese technical innovations was reflected in its four famous four great inventions, which are printing paper and the magnetic compass and the gunpowder. So Chinese, I mentioned Chinese civilization, two characters, enduring and primitive and productive. And politically, in ancient times, China experienced many dynasties. This is the Chinese dynasty. In each dynasty, there are many members. So, in our world, in ancient times, Chinese civilization has always been kept ahead in the world. However, since the 19th century, Chinese civilization began to fall behind. We know in the West Europe, especially in Britain, the commercial revolution in the 17th century and the 18th century, and especially the industrial revolution of the 19th century changed the balance of the powers in the world. And along with the colonial expansion, the West Europe and North America became the center of the world economic system. And other parts of the world, including Latin America, the so-called underdeveloped world, including Asia, Africa, and Latin America, also include China, become the periphery, whose role was to provide raw materials to the center and consuming industrial goods of the center. So China also could not avoid this destiny. So since the 19th century, after centuries as the leader of the world civilization, Chinese agricultural civilization was facing the challenge from the newly industrial civilization. So the turning point was the Opium War between Britain and China in 1840. We know the British arrived in China in 1637. The British arrived in China in 1637 and was permitted to establish a trading post at the city of Guangzhou, the southern port of China. But from the beginning, the British found the situation unsatisfactory because there was a large British demand for Chinese goods, especially tea. There was little Chinese interest in British goods. So the British had to pay for much of what they wanted with silver and gold. In order to solve this trade deficit problem, the British sold opium to China. The opium at that time was produced in India. India at that time was the largest colony of British Asia. The opium trade not only depleted China's precious metals, but also caused serious health and social problems in China. So, this is the young man who was sucking opium in the early 19th century. So in 1839, the Chinese government sent a high-level official, Lin Dexu, to Guangzhou and prohibited the opium trade. He ordered the British traders turn their opium to him and ordered it to be destroyed publicly. As a result, the British declared war and sent an army to China. That war was called Opium War. It was the turning point of the Chinese history. The Chinese military was not matched for the steam-powered ships and superior firepower of British. And after losing the war, China was forced to sign the Treaty of Nanjing. Nanjing Treaty was signed on British version. According to the treaty, we know Hong Kong was ceded to British until Hong Kong had been a British colony until 1997. And China was also forced to open 5 ports for trade, gunboats, and foreign residents. And the tariff was established at an average of 5%. The Treaty of Nanjing was the first unequal treaties since then. So the failure in the war weakened the Chinese upper classes. They realized China was inferior to the West in military as well as in economy. So they realized that in order to survive, China must learn from the Western countries. The earliest was called the earliest awakening was called Wei Yuan. He published a book, Treatise of the Xi Kingdoms, began to introduce the foreign countries to China. So we called Wei Yuan was the first Chinese name for opening his eyes to outside, to the outward. His main ideas was to learn from the especially strong techniques of the barbarians in order to control them. So Wei Yuan was the first Chinese who opened his eyes to look at the outside world. But we know Wei Yuan was only a scholar. Others, especially those high officials who had the same realization with Wei Yuan, began to put this realization into practice. So, for example, Li Hongzhang, who is a high official, one of the ministers of the Qing dynasty, he said, China, after the Opium War, China encountered the greatest change in its situation in 3,000 years. Li Hongzhang painfully realized that China fell behind. China was not an advanced country again. So in order to survive in the world, China had to learn from the Western world. So another official, Prince Gong, another governmental official, Prince Gong, said in 1861, the principal aim is to understand the enemy, to watch the frontiers, and prevent future disasters. These are, however, superficial measures falling short of the fundamentals. So the policy for the fundamental is to strengthen ourselves. So the officials begin a self-strengthening movement. So self-strengthening movement. So this is the first phrase of the modernization, a self-strengthening movement in China. The document of foreign ministry said in 1843, 1864. The foreign ministry in 1864, it said, we have found that the way to govern the state lies in self-strengthening. And in the present time and circumstances, the most important matter regarding self-strengthening is to train troops. But the training of troops must be preceded by manufacture of weapons. So the self-strengthening movement started the early modernization in China. Chinese government began to build a modern army and modern navy, to fund modern education, to send students to study abroad, to build modern schools. So that is the North Sea Navy built in 1960s. 1970s, the North Sea Navy was the first modern navy built in China in 1872, with only 2 ships. But in 1880s, it has 26 ships. two of them, Ding Yuan and Zhang Yuan, shaped what was superior quality by international standards. During the 1870s and 1880s, the scope of this self-strengthening movement widened with the creation of modern industries. Modern coal mining activity began in 1876. The first telegram line was erected in 1879. The first railroad began operating in 1881, and a cotton cloth mill began producing machine manufactured clothes in Shanghai in 1882. And China also sent young children to the United States to study. This is the North Sea. This is the Kaiping coal mine. And this is the first railroad in China. And also the first teenager in the United States. So the objective of the self-strengthening movement was to use the Western technology to build the wealth and power of the state so it could protect itself. The objective of the self-strengthening movement was to use the Western technology to build the wealth and power of the state so it could protect itself. Yet, however, it was important not to change the basic framework of the Chinese political system and culture. So the slogan of the self-strengthening movement was called Chinese learning for essential principles, Western learning for practical application. In other words, practical Western knowledge could be used as means to reach Chinese ends. Practical Western knowledge could be used as means to reach Chinese ends. They did not want to learn Western political institutions and culture. However, they want to use Western technology to preserve the traditional Chinese political institution and culture. So this is the first phase of modernization in China, self-strengthening movement. And from 1894 to 1895, another war broke out between China and Japan. And China was defeated by Japan, and the North Sea Navy was distracted by Japanese Navy. So this failure was another great blow to Chinese national pride. Because we know historically, Japanese had borrowed heavily from the Chinese civilization. So this failure inspired a variety of reform movements within Chinese upper class. So the failure caused the political modernization, or 100 days reform of 1898. This is the leader, one of the leaders of the reform, Liang Qichao. One of the reform, he said, my country was not weakened from her 4,000-year-long dream until she lost the war of 1895 and had to cut Taiwan and pay a huge amount of indemnity. And Liang Qichao and another his teacher, Kang Youwei, he is the teacher of Liang Qichao. advocated dramatic institutional changes, a sort of a revolution from the above. Can you please say? He said, Japan defeated us not because its ministers, generals, or soldiers were better than ours. It was because that country established various schools and institutes which developed technologies and capabilities greater than ours. The way of the West in being powerful and wealthy does not lie in its artillery or militarism, but in its exploration for principles and its encouragement of science. So, in other words, Kang Youwei and Liang Qichao realized that in order to survive, China not only had to learn Western technology, but also had to adopt Western political institutions and learn Western cultures. So this realization was a great leap, great advance from the self-strengthening movement. And one of the newspapers, Hunan Daily, said in 1898, Hunan Daily said, if China wants to stand independently among all nations of the world, she must change her calendar and custom to follow the way of the West in all the institutions. So with this kind of realization, with the support of Emperor Guangxu, at that time, with the support of Emperor Guangxu in 1898, following Kang Youwei's advice, Chinese government carried out a series of reforms. For example, in the reforms, the creation of National Assembly, the introduction of a modern school system, the construction of modern banks, railways, and steam shipping. So the reform in 1898 reflected that the modernization movement in China began to move to the political field, move from technical field to political field. China began to learn Western political institutions as well as learn technology. So this was a great advance from the self-strengthening movement. Unfortunately, the reform lasted only for 103 days. Then it was crushed by the conservatives led by Empress Cixi, who actually controlled the government, And 6 famous reformers, including the brother of Kang Youwei, was killed publicly. And Kang Youwei and Liang Qichao escaped abroad. So we know after the failure of the reform, Kang Youwei went abroad and went to many countries, including went to Mexico. The only fruit survived was the Imperial College, and after 1912, it transformed the name into Beijing University. This was the only fruit survived. And after crushing the reform, Cixi also realized that although she crushed the reform, she also realized that if China wants to survive independently in the world, it had to reform its political institutions. So Cixi himself began to carry out reforms by herself. And the measures adopted was the same as those proposed by Kang Youwei. So her reform was called New Deal in late Qing Dynasty. And so if the New Deal carried out by Cixi succeed, China would become a modern country without a revolution. But the reform was too late, because the failure of the reform gave rise to the idea that a radical revolution might be necessary to overthrow the traditional imperial system. One leader who advocated the revolution was Sun Dongshan. In 1894, he founded a small secret society called Revive China Society in Japan. Its purpose was to overthrow the dynasty, overthrow the Qing dynasty government, and establish a constitutional government. And in 1911, a military revolt broke out in Wuhan and abolished the monarchy and declared the establishment of the republic the next year. So Wuchang is a part of Wuhan. It's a very big city in the middle of China, at the bank of the Long River. And in 1911, we know a year earlier, 1910, another revolution broke out in Mexico. So at the beginning of the 1910s, two great revolutions at the same time happened in each side of the Pacific, China and Mexico. After the revolution, Sun Dongshan became the first president in Chinese history. However, the republic was soon disintegrated. Although a central government continued to prevail in Beijing, but political and military power turned to the provincial gabios, provincial warlords. And in the 1920s, two political parties, the Nationalist Party, which was founded by Sun Dongshan and headed by Jiao Jieshi, and another Communist Party headed by Mao Zedong. These two parties united and began to defeat the warlords, the militarists, began to reunify the country. However, in 1927, the two-party alliance broke up. The alliance between Nationalist and Communist Party broke up. The Nationalist Party and the leadership of Jiao Jieshi surprised its Communist allies, then finally defeated the last major militarists in China and at least established the new nationalist government. On the other hand, the communists led by Mao Zedong, after being defeated in the city, retreated, come back to the countryside. And in 1931, Japanese invaded China, and the Chinese Communist Party called for another united front between the two parties to confront the Japanese aggression. So such a united front was officially proclaimed in 1933, which means throughout 9 years of resistance against Japan, from 1937 to 1945, the Communist Party and the Nationalist Party was formally allies. But the end of the Second World War in 1945 did not bring peace and stability in China. After negotiation mediated by the United States, the Communist Party and the Nationalist Party went into war. At last, the Communist Party won the war and established the People's Republic of China in 1949. And the Nationalist Party retreated to Taiwan and established another government. So during this period, because of civil war, because of the Japanese invasion, the modernization process was in China was. And when the People's Republic of China was established in 1949, China began a socialist approach of modernization. You know, at that time, having been rejected by the Western powers. In 1949, China has only one friend, the Soviet Union. So, thus, desperate for support and advice from Soviet Union, the leaders of China decided to adopt a policy of leaning to one side, meaning to the Soviet Union. Mao Zedong went to Moscow to seek economic aid and advice for China's socialist reconstruction. So after 1949, the Soviet Union became the example of China. Following the model of the Soviet Union, Chinese government in the mainland, led by the Communist Party, tried to modernize the countries by socialist means. In the countryside, the agrarian reform law was passed in 1950, which was aimed at the redistribution of holdings of land, transforming ownership from rich landlords to middle and poor peasants. The agrarian reform law had created a nation of small peasant proprietors. But it was only the first step of the agricultural transformation. The government believed that the widely dispersed small units of cultivation would make it difficult to introduce modern agricultural technology. So after the dividing of lands, the next step was the collectivization of the countryside. By 1957, all of China's farmers had been organized into collectives. They worked together. So I think the collectives were, to some extent, similar to collective ejidos established in the agrarian reform in Mexico in the 1930s, started in the area of Laguna, also Mexico. The peasants worked together, ate together. This is I think this is a great mistake made by the Communist Party. We know the success, the existence of small farmers was the main factor of the success of the East Asian countries, like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan. This is in the countryside. And at the same time, the government tried to industrialize the economy. As in the Soviet Union, the government stressed large-scale heavy industry at the expense of lighter consumer industry. This kind of industrialization required large investment. So the Soviet Union provided about $300 million of short-term credit. And the Soviet Union also sent technical advisors, the technical advisors of the Soviet Union, supplied sophisticated industrial equipment and contributed to the construction of many large projects. Also, as in the countryside, all urban enterprises had come under state ownership. So the characteristic of the socialist modernization was emphasis on centralized planning, heavy industrial development, and meanwhile neglected the law of market economy. Emphasized on centralized planning, heavy industrial development, and neglected the law of the market economy. However, from 1949 to 1957, under the leadership of Mao Zedong, the Chinese modernization made great achievements. For example, the rate of industrial growth from 1953 to 1957 was spectacular. Production rose to 128%. However, from 1958 to 1976, a lot of mistakes were made, which caused great economic crisis and political toils. The first was the Great Leap Forward in 1958. The Great Leap Forward was both an ideological and an economic campaign to encourage the transition to communist way of life and to utilize the supplies labor power in the countryside to implement what is called rural industrialization. So this kind of original economic actions plus the natural disasters led to serious food shortage in 1959 to 1960. Because of the original economic actions plus the national disasters led to serious food shortage in 1959 to 1960, and many people died of hunger. This was the first mistake. The second, the Cultural Revolution from 1966 to 1976. By the revolution, Mao Zedong mobilized masses to confront the dissenters in the circle of communist leadership. Millions of students was organized as Red Guards to attack the country's power structures, including government and party establishments. Nearly all of the old party leaders had been attacked. This political movement caused violence, caused economic crisis. So in 1976, when Mao Zedong died, the Chinese economy had been stagnant for many years. Then, next phase, reform and openness. We know in 1976, Mao Zedong died, and Deng Xiaoping came to the forefront among the Chinese leaders. At the beginning, a series of reforms that touched almost every aspect of society. The change in agriculture, in industry, education, and made China a serious competitor in the world economy and brought prosperity to great numbers of Chinese than at any time since 1949. In addition, China began to open to the world. Of all the changes carried out by Deng Xiaoping, the first agricultural reform. Agricultural reform was clearly the most far-reaching and successful. From 1978 to 1984, the rural collectives were dismantled, and the lands was distributed to the households. So the individual peasant household, rather than the production team, became the unit in production. The household could decide all the investment and production. And after meeting its obligations to the state, they could sell their goods in the free market. So, like in the collective, the peasants now have a strong incentive to work harder, because the more they produce, the more they can keep in surplus by themselves. So the impact was immediate, a rapid growth of agricultural productivity and rural incomes. This in turn led to the mushrooming of township and village enterprises, which became the driving force for China's economic growth. So the first success was the agricultural reform. Then in the industrial sector was another great target of Deng Xiaoping's reform. We know in Mao Zedong's time, China's centrally planned economy emphasized a heavy industry and was tightly controlled by the government. Deng Xiaoping's plan, on the other hand, was corrected with state by a shift to the production of consumer goods for sale both at home and also abroad. And in the countryside, many farmers established small factories to produce consumer goods. In the cities, the state-owned factories were allowed more management autonomy, such as in the area of wage and investment. The managers have the right to hiring and dismissal of labor. And also some state-owned companies resulted to sell shares in order to raise the investment capital. At the same time, the government supported the establishment of privately owned companies. Also, the government also tried to attract foreign investment. Many coastal cities established special economic zones where foreign firms set factories or established joint enterprises with Chinese firms and could operate with a degree of economic freedom. And these foreign firms was given tax incentives and plenty of cheap labor. The first Xinjiang is the first special economic zone. Xinjiang formerly was only a small rural town. Located just across the border of Hong Kong. In 1979, Xinjiang was chosen as one of the first group of special economic zones. Within a few years, Xinjiang became a modern urban center, one of China's major economic and industrial cities. So the economic reform met with great success. Chinese economy has experienced spectacular growth since it started economic reform and the open door policy. Without the reform and the openness policy gained by Deng Xiaoping, it is impossible for China to become the second largest economy in the world. However, China's rapid economic growth has given rise to a lot of serious problems. First, corruption, widespread. So the corruption problem is getting so serious that to some extent it threatens to undermine the social fabric and the moral authority of the Chinese government Communist Party. So recently realizing this, the Central Government Party is carrying out a radical anti-corruption campaign. We know many high-level officials were removed or arrested for corruption. However, many people argue that the anti-corruption campaign cannot fundamentally get rid of corruption without political reform. And many high officials also realized that in addition to economic reform, political reform, political openness is also necessary. Corruption. Second is the growing income disparity between the growth income disparity between the fast-growing coastal areas and the backward interior provinces, between the urban and the rural areas, between the industrial and agricultural sectors, between the rich and the poor. For example, now in China, thousands of peasants left their home and went to cities looking for better living. But they are not accepted by the cities. They are excluded from the social security system, and their children cannot go to school in the cities they work. They always under the threat of unemployment, especially for those young people who went to cities with their parents when they were very young. If they go back to the homeland, they do not know how to do farm work. So this is a great problem. And the last, China's economic growth requires more supplies of resources. Now, China has only 7% of the global's arable land, only 7% of the world's arable land, but it has to feed 22% of the world's population. Also, with the continual urbanization, China will have to increase its grain production with no increase in arable land. Also, since 1993, China has become a net importer of oil. So future economic growth will raise China's energy consumption level with serious implications for the world energy market. In addition, the environmental pollution will also become a serious problem in China. So although we have made great achievements, we are still facing many serious challenges in the process of modernization in China. Okay, thank you.
Vamos a hablar en inglés. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm very happy to end some of these topics. I hope to have a discussion on a very historical and qualitative topics. We have been used a lot of times with a lot of graphs and a lot of charts, GDP going up and down and up, etc. I think your perspective is very interesting and very helpful to us. So we will make maybe a round of questions, 2, 3, 4 questions, and then you have the word, and then we will make 2 or 3 rounds. So So please, if you start saying your name, where you come from, and if you can be brief. No? Please.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sandra Tawarkuli from Mexico City, and I am economist from UNAM. I want to ask you something about the challenges of China in this moment with the global networks.
No, estamos grabando.
Okay. If you can tell me, please, what do you think about the challenges with the global networks in China? What's going on with new technologies? What do you think about the new technologies and the young people in China in this moment?
Some challenges.
Challenges.
Challenges for what? In terms of new technologies.
What do you think about the new technologies and the young people in China today?
New technology, young people in China today.
So maybe you can...
The perspective that you think that, which is the perspective that you think that could be happening in China with the young people and the technologies and the globalization? And thank you very much because you give us a beautiful and interesting story about China. Open windows, open mind. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Carlos Molina Murguia. I am from this school, the economic school here at UNAM. I am teacher in this hobby. I think that it would have been good on your exposition to speak about one topic that I think there was a lack in your exposition. That is the aims of political modernization in China. China still is a state of only one political party. There are no other political parties. And on the 80s, on the 80s decade of the last century, of 20th century, there were some aims at the 1989 year when a lot of students and workers, factory workers of the cities, many cities, not just Beijing, but many cities, started questioning that the political Communist Party was the only party existing in China. And they started proposing and reclaiming for democracy. But that desires of democracy were reprimanded in Tiananmen, and every year, the 4th of June, the Chinese government that was not true, that nobody died there. A lot of people died, not just in Beijing, but in several cities in China. And that's the thing that I think that it would have been on your exposition to make at least 2 or 3 lines about the aims of political modernization in China.
Hello, good morning. I'm Lars Donis, as well here from the UNAM, FES Aragon, other school and teaching international relations there. And my question or situation, they go in the same direction with the political system. And for me, it was interesting that you said the challenge or the problem was corruption and the need to open the system, or the need to change something. And my question would be to which form is there a discussion within the party to resolve the problem of the corruption via more openness? Thank you very much.
Okay.
very difficult question to answer. I think the young people and the new technology in China in the globalization period is a very serious challenge. So many of the advanced technologies was brought from the Western countries. So the export of Chinese manufacturers in that past mostly consume goods, not high technology. But things begin to change a little. Now we have many technology innovations in some countries. We have invested great amount of money to technology development. So maybe in the future the thing will be changed. But now we are not satisfied with that. Okay, as for the political reform and modernization and for how to avoid corruption with political reform, I think the challenge facing the Chinese government and the Communist Party is how to open the political system and at the same time keep control the government by the Communist Party. How to open the system, how to democratize the political system, and at the same time keep control of the government by the Communist Party. That was the difficulty. So I don't want to see what happened in Mexico in 2000. So I think the political openness, political reform must be carried out gradually, step by step, not radically. The first step, I think, should be the democracy in the party, not all over the world. From the democracy in the party, then spread to the whole political system. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Please.
Hello, my name is Retos. I come from Moscow, Shanghai Jiaotong University. I'm doing a research stay here with Professor Dussel. So I have a couple of questions here. Throughout Professor Dong's presentation, we've been listening to repeated mentions of the Mexican Revolution alongside the Chinese Revolution. For example, Professor Dong was mentioning that the Mexican Revolution was taking place at the same time as the Chinese Revolution, as if they were related. I would like to know what the reason is for you to establish such a relationship. As far as I know, the background, the reasons for the uprisings in both countries were different. My second question is, during the presentation, you mentioned advances that took place in the 19th century, such as the telegraph and the first railway in China, as part of China's process of modernization. More specifically, as modernization, as a process of modernization initiated by Chinese. I would like to know, or I would like to have more clarifications on your part on that matter, because as far as I know, all those technological advances were initiated by Westerners that were living in the ports open to free trade in the mainland. That's it. Thank you.
¿Alguien más? I have one last question also. And regarding, being yourself a historian, there has been a long discussion that you are very well aware, I'm sure, with Pomeranz and all these historians, mainly in the United States, from the California school, they call it, and from this interaction of China in the global and international stage in the 17th and 18th century, and what today is called the re-emergence of China. No? What is your opinion on this discussion? There are some discussions on productivity, on energy sources that, contrary to, for example, Great Britain, China was late in using coal, and potatoes versus rice, and other anecdotal stories that, according to these authors, left China out of, for around 2 centuries, left China out of the global stage. You know? What is your analysis of this more US-centered discussion on China? ¿Alguien más? Uno y dos. Question uno, and then zero.
A Dragon Mart is being built in Cancun right now. My name is David. I am a student of international relations, and I am interested in the China and Mexico relation. And I have a doubt about the Dragon Mart in Cancun. What is the importance, the real importance for China and Mexico when this complex be finished?
My name is David from the National Textile Group. I just have a question for you. When you talk about industrial reform, you say something about the state-owned companies were allowed. I would like to know how this translates in. We all know how important is the state-owned companies in the economy of China, and my question is specific about the textile industry, textile sector. These kind of companies became really strong in China. So what do you see? How do you see this industrial reform? I don't know if for you it's good from China, but it's bad for the rest of the world because these kind of companies make like a different kind of commerce. I think we all know what kind of commerce. I mean, but I would like to know your opinion about these companies in today's textile sector industry. Just in general, I mean, textile sector could be. Thank you. That's all.
Questions. Just give some ideas myself. I think at the beginning of the 20th century, two revolutions happened at the same time in Mexico and China. As for the background, I think it is dependent on the respective situations in Mexico and China. We don't have but I know that the two revolutions influenced each other. At the beginning, I read many newspapers at that time. When many old newspapers, when the Mexico Revolution happened, at first the articles in newspapers and magazines in Chinese said there is a revolt, uprising happened in Mexico. But several years later, it said it is not a revolt, it's a revolution. It reflected that the revolution in China caused the change of opinion, attitude toward the Mexico Revolution in China. So there was some, and also we know during the Mexico Revolution, many Chinese in Mexico, especially in the northern part, were affected. So there are some relations. As for the modernization in China and in Britain, I think China is the modernization process in China is an underdeveloped country. It must accomplish several objectives at the same time. Rather than one by one, such as the earlier countries, such as the United States, Britain. So it will cost many problems. So that is the original modernization and the latecomer of modernizer, and there is a great difference. As for the textile industry and about the competition between Mexico and China, that's a very serious problem, especially in the market of the United States. China and Mexico, there were some competitions, but I'm an economist, but I think that the governments of Mexico and China will try to resolve this kind of problem. Mexico should take advantage of its closeness with the United States, with the market of the United States, to improve its competitivity with China. Okay. So between the China and Mexico, I think Mexico is at an advantage than China.
Bueno, pues terminamos entonces la conferencia. Si hay algunas preguntas, etcétera, por favor, diríjanse, va a estar aquí en el momento del doctor. Y por favor, ojalá que participen ahí en el transcurso del semestre de la